The afternoon sun was warm in San Francisco, and the breeze danced lightly through the streets as Lakshmi Pichai walked quietly along the sidewalk. She wasn't wearing anything fancy, just a simple cotton saree, soft sandals, and a thin gold chain around her neck. Her silver hair was tied neatly, and she carried herself with a calm grace that didn't need attention. Lakshmi had arrived in the city only a few days ago, visiting her son, Sundar Pichai. Yes, the Sundar Pichai, the CEO of Google, and one of the most powerful tech leaders in the world. But Lakshmi didn't walk around with pride or attitude. In fact, most people around her didn't even know who she was, and that was just how she liked it. That afternoon, Sundar had gone off to the Google office for meetings. He had insisted on hiring a driver and security for her, but Lakshmi had politely declined. "I've taken buses in Chennai all my life," she told him with a gentle smile. "I think I can manage a walk around the city." So there she was, slowly exploring the famous Union Square. She was curious, not in a touristy way, but more like someone who appreciated new surroundings. She had read about this area in magazines, how it was filled with luxury shops, designer boutiques, and world-famous brands. She wasn't here to shop, really. She just liked beautiful things. Always had. When she was younger, back in India, Lakshmi used to sew clothes for her children using leftover fabric. She had a great eye for color and design, even though she'd never studied fashion. She remembered using old Vogue magazines she found at second-hand stalls to learn about styles in the West. Not because she wanted to copy them, she just loved creativity. Beauty in any form fascinated her. Music, embroidery, architecture, language. So when she saw the clean, glowing windows of a luxury store ahead, with a delicate handbag in the center of the display, her eyes lit up. She crossed the street carefully and stood in front of the large glass window. The bag inside was simple but stunning. Elegant black leather, fine stitching, and a golden clasp shaped like a flower. It was not something Lakshmi would ever buy for herself. Even if she could afford it, she'd feel guilty spending that much. But she admired the design. After standing for a few minutes just appreciating it, she decided to step inside. As soon as the heavy glass door swung open, Lakshmi felt a change in the air. The store was quiet, cold with air conditioning, and filled with a subtle perfume that smelled expensive. The white floors shone like polished ice. Two store assistants stood behind the counter, both young, stylish, and busy, talking in low voices. Lakshmi smiled and walked in slowly. Her sari brushing softly against her legs, she expected a greeting, or at least a small nod. Instead, the assistant stopped talking and glanced at her quickly. Just a second-long look, but it said everything. One of them raised her eyebrows slightly. The other gave a brief, closed-lipped smile and turned back to her phone. Lakshmi stood near a display of wallets. She didn't touch anything. She knew how delicate these items were. She just looked, calmly and curiously. Minutes passed. Other customers walked in. Young women with designer sunglasses, men in sharp suits. And the assistants immediately smiled at them, offered help, complimented their choices. Lakshmi remained invisible. She finally walked toward the counter, still calm. "Excuse me," she said in soft English. "May I see that handbag? The one in the window?" The assistant barely looked up. "That's the rose fleur bag," she said flatly. "It's a limited edition." Lakshmi nodded gently. "Yes, I saw it. It looks very well made." The assistant glanced at Lakshmi's plain sari, her old sandals, her handmade jute purse, and said, "It's quite expensive, over $6,000. Perhaps you'd like to look at something more accessible." There was no anger in her voice, just indifference. But Lakshmi heard every word clearly, every tone, every pause. She looked at the assistant, smiled softly, and said, "I understand. Thank you." She didn't raise her voice. She didn't protest. She didn't even frown. She simply turned around, walked quietly out of the store, and stepped back into the street. Outside, the city carried on as usual. Cars passed, people laughed, and music played from a nearby cafe. But inside Lakshmi, something stirred. Not pain, not even insult, something deeper, something reflective. She had grown up in a country where she had seen real poverty. She had taught underprivileged children, shared food with strangers, watched people beg for medicine in rural hospitals. She had raised a son, who rose to the top of the tech world, and yet never forgot where he came from. She had seen people judged their whole lives for the wrong skin color, the wrong clothes, the wrong accents. She had learned how to walk with quiet dignity through all of that. But still it surprised her that in a city as modern and educated as San Francisco, people still judged someone based on their outfit. Her sari was hand-woven by a craftswoman in Tamil Nadu. Her jute purse was stitched by a women's cooperative that trained widows in rural areas. Her sandals had walked through temples, schools, airports, and now luxury stores. They told stories. And yet none of that mattered to the young assistant behind the counter. Lakshmi didn't feel insulted for herself. What she felt was something more powerful: curiosity, a desire to teach, a need to show that respect shouldn't be reserved only for the loudest voices or the most expensive shoes. She didn't want revenge. That wasn't her style. She wanted understanding. She walked slowly back to her son's apartment, not saying a word to anyone. When Sundar returned home that evening, cheerful and tired from a long day, she made him his favorite masala chai and listened to him talk about his meetings. She didn't tell him what happened. Not yet. She wasn't ready to share the story. That night, after Sundar went to bed, Lakshmi sat by the window with her notepad. It was an old habit, writing down thoughts, lists, ideas. She scribbled quietly under the soft glow of the lamp. People see price, not value. Clothes over character, labels over lineage. She paused. What can I do, not to shame but to open eyes? She underlined the word open. She didn't have a plan yet, but she had a spark. A gentle fire, the kind that didn't burn things down, but lit the way forward. She knew the world didn't change through angry tweets or shouting matches. It changed through stories, through beauty, through silent strength. She would do something. She wasn't sure what it was yet, but she had an idea that would grow in the coming days. The next morning she dressed in another sari, this one pale, blue with white flowers, and stepped out with a sense of quiet purpose. She wasn't going back to the luxury store. She wasn't interested in their apology. She was going to find something more meaningful. Somewhere that beauty and dignity still held hands. Somewhere stories mattered more than logos. And with every step she took through the streets of San Francisco, Lakshmi Pichai wasn't just walking as a mother of a famous man. She was walking as a woman with something to say. And soon, the world would listen. Lakshmi Pichai sat quietly on the balcony of her son's home, sipping a cup of warm filter coffee. It was early morning in San Francisco. The sun was just rising, casting a golden glow on the tall buildings and clean streets. Birds chirped softly, somewhere nearby. The air was cool, different from the warm, busy mornings back in India. But Lakshmi liked it. She closed her eyes for a moment, feeling the calmness all around her. She was not thinking about the city, or the weather, or even the beautiful view. Her mind kept going back to what had happened the day before in the luxury store. The look the assistant had given her. The cold words. The quiet insult hidden behind a smile. It didn't make her angry, but it did stay with her. She hadn't told Sundar yet. There was no point in troubling him. He had enough stress as the CEO of one of the biggest companies in the world. She had seen how hard he worked. His days were filled with meetings, decisions, travel, emails. He barely had time for himself. Still, he always made time for her. When she visited, he sat beside her and listened to her stories, just like when he was a little boy sitting cross-legged on the floor of their old Chennai house. Lakshmi smiled thinking about those days. They had lived in a two-room flat, small and simple. Her husband, Raghunatha Pichai, worked as an electrical engineer. They had just enough to live a decent life, but not enough to waste. She remembered washing clothes by hand, standing in the sun, making pickles during summer, saving rupees to buy school books. Sundar had shared everything with his brother, even pencils and notebooks. Back then, luxury wasn't about brands or cars or big houses. Luxury was getting a cold drink during a power cut. Luxury was having a full meal during a festival. And yet Lakshmi never complained. She knew what really mattered. Values, not valuables. She had taught Sundar to be curious, to read, to ask questions, to be kind. Every time he got a prize in school, she would clap loudly, her eyes full of pride. But she never let it go to his head. She would remind him, no matter how high you fly, always keep your feet on the ground. And he had listened. Even today he was the same, humble, respectful, soft-spoken. That was her greatest success. As Lakshmi sat sipping her coffee, those memories danced in her mind like old friends, and slowly an idea started to form. Not a big plan, just a simple thought. How do you show people the real meaning of elegance? How do you help them see that value isn't always visible on the outside? She didn't want to go back to the store and scold anyone. That wasn't her way. She didn't want to call the media or post anything online. No. She wanted to respond. With grace. With action. With something so quietly powerful that it would make people think. She would do something that honored tradition, skill, and dignity. Something beautiful. She walked into Sundar's study room. It was a peaceful space with a large desk, bookshelves, and a soft reading lamp. She opened her purse and took out a little notepad. On the first page, she wrote 3 words: beauty, respect, message. Then she picked up her phone and began scrolling through her contacts. She found the name she was looking for, Ritika, an interior designer Sundar had introduced her to a year ago. Ritika had helped decorate a Google event with Indian art and had once told Lakshmi, "Ma'am, if you ever want to plan something creative, I'd love to help." Lakshmi smiled and sent her a message. "Are you free for tea tomorrow? I have an idea." That afternoon she left the apartment and walked to a small boutique she had noticed earlier, hidden between larger shops. It wasn't a luxury brand. It was run by an Indian-American designer who worked with artisans from Rajasthan and Bengal. The moment Lakshmi walked in, the air felt different. The shopkeeper greeted her with a warm smile and offered her chai. The walls were decorated with handmade textiles, embroidered scarves, and hand-painted bags. Lakshmi spent over 2 hours there, speaking to the owner, learning about the artists, touching the fabrics, and admiring the skill behind each item. She didn't buy anything that day. She didn't need to. What she was collecting was inspiration. The next day, Ritika arrived at the apartment, curious and excited. Lakshmi welcomed her with idli and coconut chutney, and once they had finished eating, she shared her story. The store, the assistant, the insult, and then the idea. "I want to create an experience," Lakshmi said, her eyes shining. "Not to sell things, not to shout at anyone, but to show them what beauty truly means." Ritika leaned forward. "What kind of experience?" Lakshmi smiled. "A gallery. For one day. Just a small private event. We'll display handmade pieces, bags, clothes, jewelry, but not with price tags, with stories, the names of the women who made them, their villages, their history. I want people to walk through and feel something, to feel pride, to feel respect." Ritika was silent for a moment, then nodded slowly. "That's brilliant." Within hours, Ritika was on her phone calling contacts. She knew a gallery space nearby that sometimes hosted art events. She called the owner and explained the idea. The woman agreed instantly. "I've never heard of anything like this," she said. "Tell Lakshmi, ma'am, we'd be honored." For the next few days, the apartment became a center of creativity. Lakshmi worked with Ritika to select pieces from Indian cooperatives and artisan groups. She called friends in Chennai, Madurai, Kolkata. She spoke to NGOs who trained women in weaving, embroidery, and tailoring. Everyone was excited to be part of it. Packages began arriving: handloom saris with intricate patterns, clutches with mirror work, necklaces made of terracotta. Lakshmi opened each box with care, reading the little notes that came with them. One note said, "Made by Rekha Devi, age 54, from Bihar. She uses her earnings to educate her granddaughter." Another said, "Hand-stitched by Sarita, a widow from Gujarat, who now trains other women in her village." Lakshmi read every name, every story. She felt like each item was more than just cloth or thread. It was a piece of someone's life. One evening, while placing a small handmade bag on a table, Lakshmi paused. She ran her fingers over the soft fabric and whispered, "This is the real luxury. Love in every stitch." Meanwhile, Ritika was busy designing the space. There would be no flashing lights, no loud music, just soft lighting, warm colors, and quiet corners where people could stand and reflect. At the entrance, they would place a simple sign: "The Timeless Woman, a Journey of Beauty and Respect," curated by Lakshmi Pichai. As the day of the event came closer, invitations were sent out, not to celebrities or influencers, just a mix of people: designers, students, teachers, artists, and yes, even staff from the luxury store. They were invited anonymously. No explanation. Just a polite card that said, "You are invited to experience something special. Dress simply. Come with an open heart." Lakshmi didn't want to stand on a stage or give a big speech. She just wanted to be there, walking among the guests, watching their reactions. The night before the event, Lakshmi sat again on the balcony, looking at the stars. She thought of her mother, who had once stitched her school uniform with loving hands. She thought of her husband, who had always encouraged her to think big, even in their small home. She thought of every woman who had been overlooked, dismissed, or judged, just because she didn't wear the right clothes or speak the right language. This was for them, for all of them. She whispered into the night air, "Tomorrow they will see us. They will see our worth." And in her heart, she knew. This wasn't just a response to one moment in a store. This was a quiet revolution, one stitched with thread, powered by dignity, and wrapped in grace. The morning of the event arrived like the opening scene of a beautiful film. The sky above San Francisco was soft and golden, with fluffy clouds slowly drifting by. On a quiet street near Union Square, the glass doors of a small art gallery stood, open, welcoming sunlight and soft footsteps. Inside, the air was filled with the gentle scent of jasmine and sandalwood, familiar and comforting. This wasn't just another gallery show. It was something different, something with soul. Everything in the room had been arranged with love and care. The walls were lined with delicate fabrics, hand-woven saris from Tamil Nadu, mirror-embroidered dupattas from Gujarat, and shawls from Kashmir. Tables displayed clutches, handbags, jewelry, and even tiny trinkets, each with a neat card next to it. But instead of prices, the cards held stories. One card read, "This scarf was made by Latha, a mother of 3 from Andhra Pradesh. She weaves for 6 hours a day. Her dream is to send her youngest son to medical school." Another said, "These earrings were shaped by Pushpa, a tribal woman from Odisha. She learned terracotta art from her grandmother." The soft lighting gave everything a glow, almost as if the items were alive, telling their stories in silence. Ritika was moving around the space, checking details, adjusting displays, talking to the small team of volunteers. but Lakshmi was calm, sitting quietly in a corner chair, wearing a cream sari with blue borders and simple silver earrings. Her hair was tied back in a low bun, and her face glowed with peace and pride. She wasn't nervous. She wasn't worried about who would come. She only hoped that the people who did come would feel something real. By 11 a.m., the first guests began to arrive. Some were artists and designers curious about the theme. Others were teachers, NGO workers, and local residents who had heard about the show from a friend. A few well-dressed people arrived with puzzled expressions, unsure of what the event was about. Among them were two women from the same luxury store where Lakshmi had been insulted. They didn't know she was the one who had invited them. They thought it was some kind of artisan exhibit. But they were curious. As people stepped in, their expressions slowly changed. At first they looked around as if walking into any other boutique or gallery. But then they began to read the cards. They began to feel the fabrics, hold the jewelry, look at the photographs of the women who had made them. Whispers filled the air. "Did you read this one? This woman made this by hand? She supports her whole family?" One man stood silently in front of a quilt made from old sari pieces. The card beside it said, "This quilt was stitched by Savitri from Maharashtra. She collects old saris from her village and gives them new life. She says, 'I stitch my memories into every square.'" He stared at it for a long time, then quietly wiped his eyes. There was no music, no loud talking, just a deep, thoughtful silence. People moved, slowly taking it all in. Many sat on the benches placed around the room, just to absorb what they had seen. And in the middle of it all sat Lakshmi, smiling kindly at those who noticed her, nodding softly at those who paused near her. One of the assistants from the luxury store, the same young woman who had looked at Lakshmi with doubt, stood near a display of bags. She picked up one, ran her hand along the edge, and read the story card attached. This bag was hand-stitched by Radha, a widow from Rajasthan. She says she never believed her hands could make something beautiful, until someone told her they could. The assistant put the bag down slowly. She looked around the room, searching. Her eyes landed on Lakshmi. Something about her seemed familiar. The soft sari, the calm face, the gentle strength. She frowned slightly as if trying to remember where she'd seen her before. Lakshmi stood up and walked toward her, not angry, not smug, just warm and kind. "I hope you're enjoying the stories," she said gently. The assistant blinked and nodded. "Yes, they're incredible." Lakshmi smiled. "Beauty can come from pain, struggle, and quiet strength. Sometimes we forget that." The girl's face changed. Her voice lowered. "Have we met before?" Lakshmi looked at her for a moment, then said quietly, "I visited your store last week. I was interested in a handbag." The young woman froze. The memory clicked in her mind. The older woman in the simple sari. The one they ignored. The one she had gently dismissed. Her eyes widened and her cheeks turned red. "Oh, I didn't know." Lakshmi held up her hand. "It's all right. I didn't come here to embarrass anyone." The girl swallowed hard. "I'm so sorry." Lakshmi nodded kindly. "Sometimes we're all too quick to judge. But this event isn't about shame. It's about reminding us that value doesn't always wear a label." The girl didn't know what to say. Her heart pounded. She had expected anger or pride. But this quiet grace, felt heavier than any scolding. Lakshmi gently placed a hand on her shoulder and said, "I'm glad you came." As the event continued, people began leaving notes in a small guest book near the exit. Some wrote poems. Some left thanks. Some even asked how they could support the women behind the pieces. One note read, "I walked in thinking I'd see art. I walked out seeing humanity." Another, "Thank you for opening my eyes. These women are the true designers of elegance. News of the exhibit spread. A blogger who attended posted photos and described the event as a silent revolution of dignity. The post went viral. Journalists started calling Ritika. People from other cities wanted to host the same event in their galleries. Even some luxury brands reached out, asking if they could collaborate or support the artisans. But Lakshmi wasn't chasing fame. She politely said no to all interviews. She said yes only to one thing: creating a small online platform where people could buy handmade items and read the stories behind them. She called it Threads of Dignity. Sundar finally learned about the whole event 2 days later, when one of his colleagues showed him the blog post. He walked into the apartment that evening holding his phone, his eyes wide. "Amma, what is this?" Lakshmi was folding saris, placing them gently back in her suitcase. "Oh, that," she said casually. "Just something I did to pass the time." Sundar laughed. "Amma, people are talking about it everywhere. Why didn't you tell me?" Lakshmi looked at him with her usual calm smile. "Because it wasn't about me, Kana. It was about them. The women who stitch, weave, create, and never get seen. I just helped tell their story." He hugged her tightly. "I'm proud of you." She pulled back and tapped his forehead gently. "And I'm always proud of you. But never forget, even when you wear a suit and walk into fancy meetings, what you carry inside is more important than what you wear outside." Sundar nodded. "I won't forget, Amma." A few days later, Lakshmi flew back to India. Her journey on the plane was quiet and peaceful. She sat by the window, watching the clouds roll by, thinking of all the women whose names had been read aloud, whose stories had touched hearts. She didn't return with shopping bags or luxury gifts. She returned with something more powerful, a reminder that in a world full of noise, sometimes silence can speak the loudest. That grace is stronger than pride, and that a soft hand, holding a needle and thread, can change how people see beauty, forever. And somewhere, in a luxury store back in San Francisco, a young assistant now greeted every visitor, no matter how they looked, with a genuine smile and open heart, because sometimes a single encounter can change everything. All it takes is someone brave enough to answer insult with wisdom and silence with purpose. And that someone was Lakshmi Pichai. Lakshmi Pichai's return to India was simple and quiet, just like her personality. She didn't want flowers at the airport, no photographers, and no grand welcome. When the plane landed in Chennai, she quietly walked through the airport, holding her handbag and a small suitcase. Outside, the warm air hugged her like an old friend. The noise of auto rickshaws, the calls of street vendors, the smell of jasmine and filter coffee. It all felt like home. Her younger son, who still lived in India, came to pick her up. He gave her a tight hug and said, "Amma, you've gone viral. Do you even know what that means?" Lakshmi smiled and shook her head. "I went to America to visit my son, not to become a virus," she said, making him laugh out loud. As they drove home, Lakshmi looked out the window at the busy roads. So much had changed in Chennai. New malls, tall buildings, bright lights, but some things were still the same. The small tea stalls at every corner, the women in saris walking with baskets on their heads, the sound of temple bells. She felt grounded, safe, happy. Back at home, Lakshmi's neighbors came to see her. They brought sweets, flowers, and 100 questions. "Lakshmi Akka, is it true you started a shop in America? Did you meet movie stars? Are you going back again?" Lakshmi laughed and served everyone filter coffee and murukku. She didn't tell the whole story. She only said, "I met some wonderful people. We shared some stories. That's all." But the truth was, things were not the same anymore. Something had changed inside her. The way people looked at her had also changed. Women from her apartment complex, who earlier just said hello and walked past, now stopped to chat, asked for advice, and treated her with more respect than before. Even the young girls, who were usually busy with phones and selfies, began calling her Lakshmi Auntie and asking questions about design, art, and even business. One day, a 19-year-old girl named Kavya came to meet her. Kavya was studying fashion design and had seen the blog about Lakshmi's event. She was shy but curious. She brought her sketchbook and showed Lakshmi her designs. "Auntie, I want to do something like you. Not just clothes for shows, but clothes that tell stories. Can you teach me?" Lakshmi looked at the sketches. They were colorful, creative, and full of life. She saw talent, yes, but more than that, she saw hunger. Hunger to learn, to do something meaningful. She nodded slowly. "Okay, we'll start small. First, you'll come every weekend. We'll talk about fabrics, stitching, embroidery, not just design, but the lives behind each piece." That was the beginning of something new. Word spread quickly. More young girls started coming, some from design schools, some from villages nearby, some who had never drawn a single design but had the will to learn. Lakshmi didn't open a school. She didn't charge any money. She just opened her living room. The small space became a place of learning. Every Sunday, girls sat on the floor with notebooks and cloth samples. They listened to Lakshmi explain the difference between Banarasi silk and Kanchipuram silk. They learned how a single sari could take a month to weave, how mirror work came from Gujarat, how each region of India had its own art, its own style. But more than technical lessons, they learned stories. Lakshmi told them about the women she had met through the Threads of Dignity platform, the ones who wove through sorrow, stitched through silence, painted through pain. The girls didn't just learn design, they learned empathy. One afternoon, while teaching how to read fabric textures, Lakshmi paused and said, "Cloth is like people. Some are soft, some are rough. Some need washing to show their color. Some shine in any light. You must treat every fabric and every person with respect." That line stayed with the girls. Many wrote it down. Some later said it changed the way they saw the world. Meanwhile, Sundar, back in the US, kept getting calls from big organizations and brands. Everyone wanted to know more about his mother's initiative. Google's own community teams reached out, offering to help promote Threads of Dignity globally. Sundar called Lakshmi and said, "Amma, people want to donate. They want to help. Scale this." But Lakshmi wasn't in a hurry. She told him, "Let it grow slowly like a tree. Strong roots take time." However, she agreed to one thing: starting a small artisan network in India itself. The idea was simple: connect local craftswomen to young designers. Let them learn from each other. Let old traditions meet new ideas. And so, the Threads of Dignity Craft Circle was born. It started with just 10 women, 5 experienced artisans from rural areas, and 5 young designers from cities. They met once a month, shared skills, worked on pieces together, and created collections that blended old beauty with modern style. One of the first projects was a set of eco-friendly handbags made with leftover silk scraps. The idea came from Kavya. The stitching was done by Parvati, a 62-year-old woman from a nearby village who had never been outside her hometown. When the bags were finally displayed at a small local exhibition, people loved them. They weren't just bags. They were living examples of teamwork across generations. The success of the project gave everyone a boost. More women joined. More ideas were shared. They started making not just clothes and bags, but also jewelry, journals, cushion covers, and even bookmarks. All handmade, all meaningful. One day, Lakshmi received a parcel from America. It was a large brown envelope with a handwritten note inside. The note read, "Dear Mrs. Pichai, I visited your Threads of Dignity gallery in San Francisco. I was one of the silent observers who left without saying much. But I want you to know, it changed me. I now work for a luxury brand, and we've started a new line inspired by artisans, giving them full credit. We call it real luxury. You taught us what class really means. Thank you. The letter touched Lakshmi deeply. She had never aimed to change the fashion world, but somehow with just her simple idea and quiet actions, she had done exactly that. More good news followed. A design institute invited her to speak to students. She refused at first, saying, "I'm not a professor." But after some convincing, she agreed. When she arrived at the college, hundreds of students were waiting. She didn't give a long speech. She just told stories. She spoke about Latha, Rekha, Sarita, the hands behind the art. And she ended with one sentence. "When you design, don't forget who made your needle." The crowd gave her a standing ovation. Back in Chennai, Lakshmi's Sundays continued. More girls came. The living room was now too small, so the sessions moved to a nearby community hall. Kavya and others helped organize the classes. They printed lesson sheets, arranged materials, and sometimes even taught parts of the sessions themselves. Lakshmi would sit in the front, sometimes just watching. She felt proud, not because her name was being praised, but because the knowledge was spreading like light through a window. One evening, while sipping tea on her veranda, a neighbor asked, "Lakshmi, you've done so much. What's next?" Lakshmi thought for a while, then said, "There's no next. Just more women, more stories, more dignity." And that was the truth. Lakshmi never became a brand. She never opened a fashion house. She didn't buy a big bungalow or go on interviews. She stayed the same. Simple saris, soft voice, kind eyes. But she gave birth to something larger than herself. A quiet movement of respect. And it all began with a moment of rejection in a luxury store. Sometimes life gives you two choices when someone looks down on you. You can bow your head, or you can rise higher, not by shouting, but by showing. Lakshmi chose to rise. And in doing so, she lifted hundreds of others with her, from thread to thought, from insult to inspiration, from a soft-spoken mother to a silent revolutionary. And yet, she would tell you she's done nothing special. That's the thing about real class. It never announces itself. It just enters the room, changes hearts, and leaves behind something better than applause. Respect. Of course. Here's the final part of the story explained in simple and interesting English, around 2,500 words, continuing directly from Part 4, without a heading. Months passed. The sun rose and set over Lakshmi Pichai's small Chennai home just like it always had, but something invisible had changed in the air. There was more movement, more energy, more dreams being shaped quietly by hands that once only worked in silence. The women in her community had begun to walk with their backs straighter. The young girls who came to learn from her smiled more, spoke louder, and started believing in their ideas. And every Sunday the small community center nearby filled with colors, threads, fabrics, papers, voices, and stories. Lakshmi still woke up early every morning, made her coffee just the way she liked it, watered the plants on her balcony, and read the newspaper. She didn't have a schedule packed with meetings. She didn't have a secretary, but her phone beeped constantly. Messages from girls asking for advice, photos of new designs, invites from colleges, NGOs, even international groups. She answered all of them with the same patience and warmth, one at a time. Threads of Dignity, the platform she had started after the San Francisco event, had grown. Not fast like a rocket, but steady like a banyan tree. With the help of her son and a few kind volunteers, the platform now connected over 200 artisans across India. Women, who had never left their villages, were now getting orders from buyers in Europe, Canada, and Australia. But Lakshmi had made one rule. Every product must have the story of its maker. No anonymous items, No hiding behind brands. The world would know who made what and why. One of the women, Pushpa from Odisha, used to make clay earrings that barely sold in her local market. Now she sent parcels every month to France, where a boutique displayed her creations along with her photo and a little card that said, "Handcrafted by Pushpa, who molds her dreams from mud." When the store owners sent her a video of a Parisian customer admiring her work, Pushpa cried. Not because she became rich, but because someone far away had seen her, truly seen her. In a small village in Madhya Pradesh, a group of widows who had been treated like shadows for years had started making embroidered scarves. With Lakshmi's gentle support and the visibility from Threads of Dignity, they started earning enough to send their children to school. One of them, Rekha, wrote to Lakshmi, "For the first time, we are not invisible. Our hands are no longer just for survival. They are for creation." Lakshmi kept all the letters she received in a wooden box in her cupboard. Some were handwritten, some typed and printed, some scribbled in local languages. But each one felt like a piece of her own, soul being reflected back at her. Meanwhile, her weekly workshops in Chennai became more than just classes. They became spaces of healing and confidence. Girls who were once too shy to speak now took the lead in organizing events. Kavya, the young design student who first came to her with a sketchbook, had now created her own line of sustainable accessories, each inspired by traditional Indian art forms and made in collaboration with village women. She named the brand Amma's Hands in honor of Lakshmi. Kavya also began writing blogs about her journey, talking about how learning from Lakshmi was not just about fabric and thread, but about seeing people differently. Her posts became popular. One was even translated into multiple languages. A publishing company reached out to her, asking if she wanted to write a book. She agreed, but only on one condition. The book would be about the women who inspired her, not about herself. One afternoon, as Kavya sat with Lakshmi drinking coffee, she asked, "Auntie, do you know how many lives you've changed?" Lakshmi smiled and looked at the sky. "No, dear, I don't count lives. I just do what I know." Kavya laughed softly and said, "That's exactly why it matters." Far away in America, Sundar Pichai continued his work as the CEO of one of the world's biggest tech companies. But now, every time he gave a talk or sat in a meeting about innovation and change, he thought of his mother. He often told his colleagues, "If you want to understand real impact, don't just look at big data. Look at small lives touched in meaningful ways." He also began supporting women's initiatives quietly, funding small workshops in rural India, offering scholarships to craft students, and helping NGOs connect with the Threads of Dignity network. But he made sure his mother's name wasn't used for fame or promotion. Lakshmi didn't want it. She believed that when a seed becomes a tree, the root must stay humble. One day, Lakshmi received a call from a museum in New Delhi. They were organizing an exhibition on the untold stories of Indian women. They wanted to dedicate a section to the Threads of Dignity movement and asked Lakshmi if she would come and share her journey. She hesitated. She didn't like spotlights or speeches. But then the curator said, "It's not about you, ma'am. It's about the women you helped bring into the light." She agreed. When she reached Delhi, she was greeted not with garlands or applause, but with quiet admiration. The section of the museum dedicated to her work had photos of artisans, samples of fabrics, QR codes that played their voices telling their stories, and a simple panel that read, "She didn't open a factory. She opened minds. She didn't sell fashion. She sold dignity. She didn't wear power. She wore grace." Visitors walked through the gallery slowly, many with tears in their eyes. Some left notes at the exit thanking Lakshmi for reminding them what strength really looks like. After the event, as she was walking toward the exit with Kavya, an elderly woman stopped her. "Are you Lakshmi Pichai?" she asked. Lakshmi nodded. The woman took her hand and held it tightly. My granddaughter is learning embroidery now. She says one day she wants to start her own label, but only if it helps someone else. You planted that seed. Thank you. That night, as Lakshmi sat in her hotel room, looking out at the lights of the city, she felt something deep and quiet inside her heart. Not pride, not excitement, just peace. She whispered to herself, maybe this is what being rich, really, means. Back in Chennai, life continued with its usual rhythm. The local temple bells rang every morning. Milkmen made their rounds. Auto drivers called out for passengers. But hidden behind this ordinary routine was a growing revolution. Quiet, graceful, handmade. Lakshmi never sought awards, but they came. A women's organization honored her with a Lifetime Contribution Award. A university offered her an honorary doctorate. But she always said the same thing in her speeches, short and sweet. I'm not a designer. I'm not a leader. I'm just someone who believes in hands that create and hearts that care. Years passed. The girl she once taught now taught others. Kavya's brand grew internationally. The Threads of Dignity platform had chapters in 12 Indian states. Craft circles popped up in villages, cities, even in urban slums, where women found hope in thread and cloth. One winter morning, a journalist from a major newspaper came to interview Lakshmi. He asked, "What is your proudest moment?" She thought for a moment and said, "When a woman who once believed she was worthless sold her first creation and said, 'Maybe I'm not nothing after all.' That's my moment." Then he asked, "What's your dream now?" Lakshmi smiled and replied, "My dream is that one day, no woman will need someone like me to remind her of her worth. That dignity won't be given. It'll just be there, like air." The journalist wrote his article. It went viral. Many called her a revolutionary. Some called her the mother of Indian craft, but she still just called herself a housewife. Eventually, the time came when Lakshmi began to slow down. Her hands trembled a little. Her voice softened even more. But the work didn't stop. Because, by now, she wasn't the only one doing it. She had passed it on, like a flame from one diya to another. On her 75th birthday, her family organized a small celebration. No stage, no microphones. Just a backyard gathering with food, laughter, and stories. Kavya gave her a handmade journal filled with letters from artisans across India. Each one thanking her, blessing her, remembering her. As she read each letter, Lakshmi wiped her eyes and said, "What more could anyone want?" And truly, what? More? She had not only created a platform, she had created pride. She had not only told stories, she had given women the courage to tell their own. She had not only taught how to stitch, she had stitched together hope, strength, and purpose. She had answered insult with kindness, rejection with revolution, and silence with dignity. And though she never wore diamonds or silk gowns, the world now saw her for who she truly was. A queen, with a throne built not of gold, but of quiet courage. And so, the story of Lakshmi Pichai didn't end with her. It lived on in every scarf, every bag, every thread stitched by a hand that once doubted itself. Because real beauty, like real power, never fades. It only multiplies. In silence, in smiles, in strength.